and give you, so the agenda today, we're going to give you a brief overview of what CellWeb is, what it measures, just for that broader context, because I think it's super important to know. And I'm going to do that just for a few minutes, and then Maria, I'm going to switch the screen over to Maria, and she's going to talk about how to navigate the interface, how to access the reports, and we're just have question and answer about report interpretation and whatever other stuff would be helpful to you. Okay? Okay, so let me do my screen share. All right, you should be able to see my screen. And I'm just going to go ahead and, even though it's, even though it's a PowerPoint, it's not going to be too formal. But I want to give you a sense, first of all, of what CellWeb assesses and also how the assessment works. CellWeb is designed to measure 4 skill areas. One is, my thing is stuck, so hang on a sec. Emotion recognition, which involves how knowing what other people feel from nonverbal cues like facial expressions. The second is social perspective taking, which has to do with understanding other people's intentions or beliefs, really being able to see things as someone else does. A third area is social problem solving, which has to do with understanding and being able to navigate challenging social situations. And a fourth area is self-control, which involves the ability to voluntarily modulate your thoughts and feelings in service to a goal. Now, we chose these 4 areas to assess for a number of reasons. One of them is that there's a lot of evidence that the better equipped children are with each of these skills, the higher quality their interactions with peers, the better they're able to participate in classroom life, and the better they do on a host of functional outcomes, including academics. So there's a lot of evidence that being equipped with these skill areas is a good thing. We wanted not just to measure one dimension, but multiple dimensions. In fact, these dimensions overlap the CASEL model of social and emotional learning. What we call emotion recognition and social perspectives taking are related to what CASEL calls social awareness. What we call social problem solving is a part of what CASEL calls responsible decision making, and what we call self-control is a part of what CASEL calls self-management. So everything that CellWeb is designed to assess is represented in the CASEL model and other models of SEL. Not everything in the CASEL model is measured by CellWeb, though. The other reason we decided to measure these 4 areas, and this I think goes to the question that somebody was raising about, how do you use the data? The skills that CellWeb is designed to assess are the very same skills that are the target of instruction in some of the most commonly used social and emotional learning programs. Now, I don't know if you're using something like a Second Step or a Sanford Harmony or an Open Circle or Getting Along Together, or any one of the numerous well-constructed SEL programs. But this page shows the scope and sequence of the 1st and 2nd grade lessons for Sanford Harmony. And each of these columns is one of the skill areas that CellWeb assesses: emotion recognition, social perspective taking, social problem solving, and self-control. And where there's a checkbox, it means that the lesson was designed to teach that skill. Where there are 2 checks, it means that there's a really very tight fit between what the lesson is designed to teach and what CellWeb assesses. And what you see from this is that every lesson in the scope and sequence is designed to teach at least one of the skills that CellWeb assesses, and every skill that CellWeb assesses is covered in multiple lessons in the scope and sequence. This is true of Sanford Harmony, it's true of Second Step, it's true of PADS, it's true of others too. So we have these kinds of program alignments for other programs as well.
Hey, Clark.
Yes.
Might just be me. I'm not seeing your screen. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong on my end. I thought I saw the pop-up of the screen share, but I'm not seeing it now. If I need to.
This is Amanda.
Yeah.
Does everyone else see my screen? You see a PowerPoint with the table.
So Amanda, I have to look at a different window, so I can see everyone's faces in one window, but the screen is showing up in another. Are you able to see?
I have everyone's. Sorry, I'm usually not tech illiterate.
No, it's okay.
I have the video, like everyone's thumbnail to the side, and then I have the Zoom window that popped up separately, but it's just, it might be on my end. I might need to see.
Here's what I'm going to do, because every once in a while there's some, glitch that hits only one person. I'm actually going to stop sharing for a second, and then I'm going to reshare the window and see if that works. Okay. So I stopped the share, and now I'm going to reshare, and in a second, you should see the window. Does everybody see that PowerPoint? Amanda, do you see it?
No.
Okay.
I can close out of the call potentially and try to. I don't want to hold everyone up, so. Not.
Is this one moving in here?
Quite sure. I'm not really sure what to do. I think I'm just gonna close out and restart my computer and rejoin if it happens.
Okay. Well, I'll give you the two-sentence summary of where we've come to while you were gone. Okay. So we'll see you in a few seconds. Okay, no problem. Okay. So, this is, you get a sense, we do assessment, other people do programs. We're trying to help our partners link what they learn from assessment to the programs. So this is just to give you a sense of how we can support you moving forward.
Clark, do you happen to have a program alignment for Caring Schools?
No, I don't actually, but if you, is that who publishes that? Is that the Center for the Collaborative Classroom?
Yes.
Caring Schools. Is that, you're using Caring Schools, I gather?
We are.
Okay. So let me ask you, do you have, is there like a summary piece of paper or a couple of pages that has a list of the scope and sequence of the lessons?
Yep, there probably is. Do you want me to send that to you?
If you do that, I'll make one of these for you.
Okay, that would be awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So let me just give you, I'm mindful of the time, but let me give you a little bit of a sense of what the CellWeb content is. Hi, Amanda, you're back.
I don't think I ever left. I clicked shut down my computer, and it asked me if I was sure if I wanted to close the Zoom, and everyone popped up. So I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened, but I can see everyone and your screen now.
Fantastic. I love knowing that everybody's on board. So this is a program alignment. If you're using a program and you want me to send you one or make one for you, you're going to let me know. Now, let me give you a little flavor for what CellWeb's different assessment modules look like and what they measure. One important thing about CellWeb that's a little different from something like a Panorama or a DESA is that it's a direct assessment of social emotional skills. And by that, I mean we want to give kids tasks that require them to demonstrate their social emotional skills rather than fill out a questionnaire where they tell us what they think their social emotional skills are, or where a teacher rates the frequency of behaviors. So for example, to measure emotion recognition for CellWeb early elementary, we show kids pictures of faces and ask them to say if they're happy, sad, angry, scared, or just okay. All right? They're not saying, I know how to read emotions, and teachers aren't rating behavior, right? Their kids have to show us their skills. For CellWeb late elementary, are people using both the early and the late elementary assessment?
No, we're just going to do early elementary for our K through 3 grades, yeah.
All right, I'm going to skip this one then, but we have kind of developmentally appropriate versions of the assessment modules for late elementary too, and if you're ever interested in learning about them, just let me know. For early elementary, to get at social perspective taking, we tell kids stories that are illustrated and narrated, and some of them have to do with, say, a person saying one thing but meaning something else. And then we ask questions about why the character said what she said. And to get that right, the child taking the assessment has to understand the reason, the intention behind saying one thing, even though the person meant something else. Okay, we're getting at social perspective taking here. With social problem solving, we tell kids, again, illustrated and narrated stories about hypothetical challenging social situations. And we ask them questions about how they'd like it to turn out. So that gets at their social goals if they were in that situation. What kinds of solutions they prefer. So we give them a range of different things they could do if they were in that situation. They select what they would do. And we also ask them to sort of rate the reason for another actor's characters. In this case, this girl wanted to join these two girls playing basketball. She walks up to them and says, "Can I play?" And they don't say anything. It's a peer entry situation, which is super important skill on the playground and in cocktail parties. And one of the questions is, did these kids do that to be mean? Because if you assume that other people are doing things from a hostile intent, you might develop a whole set of strategies that's different than if you think, well, they just didn't hear me. Okay, so we're getting at a whole range of ways kids think about social problems here. For self-control, we have two modules in CellWeb EE. One is a delay of gratification module. And for this one, in the opening screen, kids see 3 rocket ships at the bottom of the screen. One is worth 1 point and goes really fast. One is worth 2 points and goes slowly. And one is worth 3 points and it goes really, really slowly. And kids are told they get 10 rocket ships to send into space and they should get as many points as they can. So the question here is really, how much are kids willing to put up with the relative tedium or boredom of the slower rockets in service to getting a higher score? The second self-control task for early elementary is a frustration tolerance task. And for this task, kids see pairs of shapes, and we tell them to click the checkbox if the shapes are the same, and click the X if they're different. And we tell them to get as many right as they can in 90 seconds. We've programmed it so that after they make their entry on several items, there's a pause as if the computer were kind of frozen, which, just like for you and me with our iPhones, induces mild frustration when there's a little glitch. And so the question is, can kids sort of stay on task and continue to solve the problems even when they feel that mild frustration? Okay, so this gives you a sense of the student's experience and the intention behind each of the modules that are designed to measure how well kids read emotions, take perspectives, solve social problems, and self-regulate. Now, in terms of, I'll tell you a little bit about the scores that the system generates, and then I'm going to hand the baton off to Maria to tell you a little bit more about administration and reporting. CellWeb Early Elementary generates 5 scores. One is for emotion recognition, one is for social perspective taking, one is for social problem solving, and one is for self-control. And then there's the 5th score, which is a kind of overall composite, which reflects skill across all of these areas. It's nationally normed, and we've scaled the score so that 100 is average, and the standard deviation is 15. Okay, so it's a fairly readily interpretable score. If a child gets 100, it means they scored in the exactly average for children their age around the country. Okay, I'm going to stop there. If there are any questions about the module content or the design, we can talk about those. If not, I'll hand over to Maria to talk a little bit about administration and score reporting. Let me pause for a second and see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, Maria, do you want to take over the screen share?
Sure. Let me, so I'll show you the nuts and bolts of kind of the student experience with this assessment. We won't go through the whole thing, but just the login process, which sometimes can be the more challenging part. And then I'll show you what the reports look like. So let me see how this works. This is not what I want to do. Hold on. No, I'm having technical difficulties with.
Are you on a different screen than you meant, Maria?
Yeah, because I think you see just the Zoom screen. Let me try again.
We saw actually the CellWeb EE login portal page.
Oh, okay. That's not what it was showing me, which is weird. But okay, I'm glad it was working for everybody else, although it's hard for me to walk through it if I don't see it. Okay, can you see the login screen now? And I can see it straight. Okay, so the way the students log in is that so they go to the URL ee.solv.com. Then every student gets their unique login, which is constructed with a district prefix, and then followed by the student ID that's provided to me in the student roster. It can be their real ID, or it can be an ID that you make up for the purposes of testing. It's up to you. But in this case, I just set up some like a test school with a test classroom with some kids in it, just to show you what this would look like. So this, I'm going to just log in as this child. Their student ID was test 2, so their login is TE, Virtual Primary Education, which is the prefix I gave them, that test 2, and then the username and the password should be the same. So you just click login, and then the assessment just takes off from there. The first thing it does is it makes sure that the student is logged into the right assessment, and it's because the scores are tied to each student's age, which is calculated by knowing their date of birth. It's really important that every student logs into their correct account. And so for this fake student, I didn't make a name for them, and so there's no name. It asks if the ID is the same. Otherwise, it would say, you know, welcome, are you Maria Cartanova, if this was the name that was given. So assuming this is correct, you say yes. And then it has the change, pick language. The assessments are available in English and Spanish. If you hit the wrong one, you can log out, log back in, and select the right language, which was not possible in the past. So this hopefully should be an improvement. So let's go ahead and select English. And then it does a sound check.
If not, change the volume. Click the arrow to start the test.
And this is just to make sure that the volume is appropriate.
You're going to do many different things today, like look at some pictures, answer questions, play with some rocket ships, and listen to stories. Try your very best and have fun.
Okay, and so the assessment is the same as before. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there's an animated dog that takes you from one module to the other, and in between these modules, and to proceed from one question to the other, from one module to the next, you hit the yellow button in the corner.
Now we're going to show you some pictures of kids' faces. We want you to say how they feel. When you're ready, click the arrow button.
And so that's the emotion recognition module that Clark described for Kids Hub 2.
You're going to see many faces. Tell us each face. Happy, sad, angry, scared, or just okay. Go ahead and give it a try. Is the face happy, sad, angry, scared, or just okay? Click on your answer. Go on to the next item. Press the arrow button.
So we
change your answer by clicking differently.
We shortened the assessment relative to last year, so now there's only 20 items.
Angry.
And so you just I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now for purpose of time. But you look at children look at each face and decide what emotion the child is experiencing in advancing by hitting the yellow button. They can see the progress on the bottom. And yeah, does anybody have any questions on the login or kind of how to advance through the assessment? Okay. I think I'm gonna, yeah. Do you want to see what the next module looks like, or should we stop at this point? How does everybody feel?
I just have a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Back in the fall, so we're just kindergarten through 3rd grade this year. Next year we'll expand to 4th grade and so on until we're 8th grade. So in the fall, we were told that 3rd graders are not taking this. It was just the teachers. Is that still, Was that correct at the time, or because our kids have definitely not done any like self-reported surveys, only the teacher reported.
So I think, Amanda, what you are referring to is the panorama part of the surveys where teachers report on their students. This is a different branch where students are actually able to show what social emotional learning they know. So I don't think, if I remember correctly, I don't think your kids took this in the fall.
They didn't, and
Okay.
I was just looking back through emails, and Joanne is who I was communicating with, and she said K3 students don't take self-report surveys since they're not grade appropriate, so we're all set. So we've never administered any student surveys. So that might explain more of my confusion of like, what's going on? I'm just unclear. Was that correct? Should our third graders have, or any students have done this in the fall? It sounds like yes.
I mean, Joanne, Joanne, you can speak to that in a sec, but just real quick, CellWeb is designed for K-3, so in theory, you can use this for your little guys and get some good data on their SEL competencies. Now, I'm not sure, Joanne, what the sort of transforming ed side, what your intent is, or what, because I know there are a lot of moving parts, so I would defer to you about guidance on whether this is the right thing to administer in Amanda's school.
Yeah, so CellWeb is optional for schools with the little ones. So if you're interested in seeing how your students are performing with social emotional learning, this is something you can opt into. But it's not required like the teacher surveys are.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay.
It is
Any other?
Amanda, so I'll just let you know that, like, even though we've been doing this for a little while, it's confusing to separate the two surveys and who's taking what. So we've had a little confusion around that too. So actually,
that's helpful. I'm like, oh my goodness, I sound like I'm coming from outer space on this call right now. Lori, do you all, so at Gen Prep, have you only done the teacher administered, or, and maybe we can chat about this later, but.
Yeah, we do both, but this, we didn't do a very good job with this last year, and I don't feel like we did a great job with it in the fall. So seeing this and walking through it again, I think we'll do a much better job with it this spring. So I'm really appreciative of you guys spending your time walking us through this. It's helpful.
Of course. Sure. You know, I know, Maria, we want to walk through reporting, but I'm also thinking that it may be helpful. I have one slide on my PowerPoint deck that kind of also walks through a use case that may be helpful in framing how CellWeb could be useful to you. That's pulling back from the weeds and sort of talking about the general use. So can I show that, walk you through it, and then hand it back to you, Maria, for reporting?
Yeah, works for me.
Okay. So let me just share my, share my screen again and walk you through this slide. So let's see. This is the most common use case for CellWeb, and the one that I think it takes the most advantage of CellWeb's strengths is that our partners would administer CellWeb in the fall, and then you get reports that tell you something about your students' social and emotional strengths and needs, which Maria can walk you through. Those, as you saw from the program alignment, can help you then make decisions about how you use the scope and sequence of your program. So for example, if you saw that there are a lot of kids struggling with social problem solving, and in your scope and sequence, the social problem solving lessons are all at the end, you might say, well, let's move some of those earlier and maybe do a little bit of reinforcement even as we're teaching other skills. You know, it's not like you're reinventing, you're just using the data to kind of tune up your use of the resources you have. You execute that plan for the course of the year and then reassess in the spring, and then you can see how your students progressed between fall and spring. So in the fall, really, CellWeb, and I think this could be done alongside and with the Panorama teacher report data, right? It's not one or the other. You get data about students' competencies from this. You get data about teacher views of students' competencies and behaviors from the Panorama survey. And together that gives you this rich formative data set in the fall. You use it to guide instruction and then reassess in the spring and see what kind of progress students have made. Okay, I'll stop now. We can talk about reporting, but I just think that of all the ways that our partners have used CellWeb, we tend to find that this is the most high impact. So I'm going to hand it over now to Maria to walk you through what some of the reports look like and how to get access to them.
Great. Let me find the screen sharing again. Before I talk about reports, there's one other kind of nuts and bolts thing that I want to tell you. And so this is what I showed you was the student side of things. Now we have now 5 different roles for how scores could be viewed, with kind of most comprehensive reports that Clark mentioned being sent to you once each school or each district finishes data collection. So there's the student level that I just showed you, and then there's the teacher level where each teacher has their own login and can log in and see which of his or her students have completed CellWeb and whether they're, what the scores are for the students who have completed it. And so again, in this kind of test example, I've made fictitious teacher that has 5 different students, one of whom has taken one module of CellWeb, and test 2 is if you log in as a teacher, you see kind of a spreadsheet view where you see all of your students. You can sort them by their ID. I didn't give a student any names, and then you can look in the fall status and the spring status columns to see where your students are. So in this case, test 1 is a test example I tested earlier. That student is in progress. Test 2 is an example we just went through together. That student is in progress. The last 3 students haven't started CellWeb. So this is sort of at a glance way for you guys to see, okay, which students still need to do this, which students are done. And then for those that are done, once you finish one module, so once you finish those phases, assessing those phases, you get a score that's the standard score that's tied to that student's age that was entered in the system. So you can kind of gauge what students are doing. Once you get enough students tested, there's also these kind of simpler built-in reports, which it's just going to say not enough data because we didn't test enough kids. But you get a kind of a one-pager view of your classroom of how the students are doing. And then in addition to the teacher view, now we also added roles higher up. So at the level of school and even at the level of district, depending on how we set up your campuses, there's a way to view student progress and student scores for the entire school or the entire district. And so just to show you an example of that, it's very similar, but I imagine some of you, that are not teachers, that's what you were going to do. And so there's fall and spring. So in this case, if we're going to do spring, going to select spring. Again, there's not enough data to produce a report for this fictitious classroom. But if you hit scores, again, you see the same view. You see your students, you see their status, you see when they logged in to do the assessment and what the scores are, if there are any scores. So we're hoping that this would be a useful way to monitor progress and completion rates that wasn't available in the previous iterations of CellWeb for those of you who have tried it in the past. I want to pause and see if there are any questions about anything I've talked about before I jump into reporting.
I just want to thank you for making these other roles available. This will be really nice to check our own data instead of relying on you to send us spreadsheets of who hasn't completed it yet. So thank you.
For sure. And you can actually, the other nifty thing is you can click on these 3 lines, and you can download this data as CSV and open it in Excel and sort it and filter however you like, which becomes really handy once you have more than 5 fictitious students. So we were happy that we were able to do that in this release. Okay, so once, so let's say in this use case, you register students, student test, students get assessed in the spring. Then, then once as many students as are able to have completed CellWeb, you tell me, okay, Maria, we're done. Can you make us a comprehensive report? And so I'll pull the data, and then I'll make a report like this. Can you see this tab? It's different. Okay. So these are new reports that we have built that can kind of go through and see that are more comprehensive than the one-pagers that I showed you a few minutes ago. I'm just moving some menus from Zoom that are coming up. So this is the district level. So these reports can be viewed at the district, school, classroom, and possibly individual student level if you tell me that you want individual student data for your school. So there are different options, but most reports include district, school, and classroom level. So this is a report for a fictitious district that has 3 different elementary schools that are listed here. It lists the number of children at each school, and then scores for the 5 categories Clara described, the four constructs of SEL, and then the overall score. That's a weighted average of the four different constructs. So you can view this as a table view. You can also click on the other tab to view data in terms of how many students, what proportion of students in the district in this case meet expectations. So their scores are between 90 and 114, or above expectations, below and well below expectations. So sort of at a glance, you can see where your district is. You can go back to the school level, or to the table data, and then you can click on each of the school names to be taken to the school level report. So let's go to the first school, Jefferson Elementary, and again we see the same kind of thing, except now each row, instead of being a school, now it's a classroom. This was a mixed grade classroom, and so this teacher had students that were considered to be in K and first grade. So it divides the data that way. And then again, you see scores for each of the categories for each of the students in this particular school. You can again see the same type of plots where it tells you how many proportion of students fall into each of the categories, and it also does this by grade. So in this case, it was just kindergarten and first grade. We didn't test anybody in second grade or third grade for the school, but this is just an example. So if you test students in the spring, you're going to get this report, except it's just going to say time point 2 for spring. If next year you choose to test students in the fall and then again in the spring, you're going to get both time points, and so you can compare the data. So you're going to have independent reports for each time point, for time point 1 and time point 2, and then also you can see change over time at district, school, and classroom level. So this is again at the school level. It tells you that in this corner. You can go back to the district level, or you can dive down into the classroom level. And here it compares data across fall and spring, again, for overall SEL performance, emotion recognition, social perspective taking, problem solving, and self-control. You can see whether there has been any improvement in each of the categories across the 2 time points. And finally, you can click on glossary, because all of this can be confusing to remind yourself what the different category breakdowns are and what each of the 4 categories of SEL stand for. So you can, go back to the district level, and then I think I'll just pause here for questions. I know I went through this pretty quickly.
Before anybody asks a question, I just want to say, well, first of all, Maria, good job in presenting this. And I would just add that those exact same kinds of plots are available at the classroom level. So you could click on a teacher and look at the percentage of students performing at different levels in her class in the fall and in the spring, and in comparison. So we've got these nice different levels of reporting that tell you something about where students are at different levels of grouping.
Yes.
Maria, I have a question for you. Is it possible, after everyone's completed testing, for us to get a comparison of how our school or our district did in comparison to others in the new schools cohort? And that's been something that's actually been really helpful for us in our other survey that we give, just for us to get a sense. It's nice to see how we compare against all of the schools in our system, but it's nice to see how we compare against the network. And then we also are able to identify some schools that are maybe outliers that we can learn from.
I mean, yeah, technically we don't, it's definitely possible to do this. So, I mean, I think it just depends on what, Joanne, if you have any thoughts on these comparisons, and whether, you know, we construct new sets of norms. I think we don't have enough data right now for this, to do this in terms of this. But if, well, so Clark, I don't know, maybe you have more thoughts. I don't.
You know, I would say that the great thing about data like this is that a lot of things are possible. And if you said to me, Joanne and everybody else, that this kind of comparison across sites and Transforming Ed, the group, would be helpful, we can certainly help construct that. I think and I don't think we need to create new norms. We can use the nationally normed scores to see where everybody lies. I think one of the questions would be about kind of the confidentiality of each school's data, because some schools may say, hey, I don't really want to be called out for my particular, so I think we would just have to think through carefully sort of how that reporting would, we could do that reporting in a way that gave you useful data, but didn't inadvertently put somebody in a spot they didn't want to be in, right? So I think that would be a question for Transforming Ed and everybody to just think a little carefully about, because you can do lots of stuff with data, you know, and so I could say yes to anything, but those are some of the sort of sensitivities that I think we'd want to think through first. And we're happy to do whatever is going to be useful for you guys.
Thank you. I think we get the data on the other survey. It just shows us in comparison to the other schools, but it doesn't list the other schools' names.
I see.
But
okay.
Sometimes we've contacted Transforming Ed or new schools and said, hey, we noticed there are some schools that are way out here in front of everyone. Could you tell us who they are? Would they be okay with that? Can we contact them?
I see.
So then we're not violating anyone's privacy. So sorry, I wasn't more that up front, but
no, that makes total sense to me. Yeah,
okay.
that seems to strike the right balance between.
Fine too.
Yeah. I wonder if somebody could share a copy of one of those reports with Maria and me, so we can take a look at it and think about how we could create that kind of report with CellWeb data too.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Would that be possible? That would be super helpful.
Yep.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I may have missed this, but I'm curious, just in connecting to Lori's question, in either looking at the national comparative data or schools that may be outliers, how clear just like the demographic makeup of the school is, and how that may, I just think there's more information there based on some of those demographic pieces to learn from. Is that something, I know like looking at what's on the screen here, you see the overall score, not necessarily subgroup. Is that something that's a way to visualize that with the demographic subgroups of students?
So, Amanda, are you suggesting you'd want to see this kind of report, but broken down by like gender, ethnicity, free and reduced price lunch, things like that?
I would be curious. I mean, it seems clear for us to pull that for our school, but even in terms of what you all are learning nationally, if there are trends or correlations or connections that you're making in the data that you're seeing overall.
Yeah, it's funny. We haven't tended to focus on demographic comparisons, in part because of I think the sort of design and intent of CellWeb, which is really to provide this formative data to inform instruction, and then to provide a kind of summative picture at the end of the year. For that, having data about groups of students and also individual students is kind of the key thing, rather than comparative data between groups. It's certainly possible to look between groups. I think I've done a little bit of poking around and seen that there are some SEL gaps, and they tend to follow the kind of same patterns as achievement gaps. I don't know how useful that is to know about, because I don't know that it's all that actionable. My feeling is that, knowing where a child starts helps you know how to instruct them and move them along to the next level. So we've been sort of more mastery focused in that way, rather than looking at comparative demographics.
Sure. Yeah, that's helpful and very understandable. And I think some of where my question is coming from, or just curiosity, is we are diverse in many ways in terms of our student population, and certainly seeing situations or incidences that are connected to like social problem solving or different than other school environments that I've been in, just given it's not like, oh, we have white students and Black students, but we have newcomers, we have students of color that identify with other cultural or ethnic groups. And so, yeah, just curious about that. But no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure. What else would be helpful to know about?
I can't think of anything else at this point other than what I mentioned at the very beginning, just a checklist of things that we need to make sure that we're doing, like what to do before testing, during testing, and after, is really helpful in organizing the information. Especially fall and spring tend to be two of our busiest times. So I just always worry that we're missing something because we're rushing. And if something like that is possible, that would be really helpful. But just even seeing this again today and getting familiar with it again is really helpful for me in working with our staff on how we can do a better job and get better data, and then thinking about how we can use this data moving forward.
Great. And Maria, I think we have developed something akin to a checklist or a kind of set up Q&A sheet. So maybe we can, for the Pacelli project, if not for us in general, so maybe we can dig that up and send that along to the Transforming Ed team.
We should take a look, because it's been a moving target, so should harmonize it with the new and improved CellWeb and send it along. But I think it's a really good idea. I think I missed the first part where Lori proposed it, but I think I can see how it could be really helpful to the schools to be on track.
That sounds great. And Lori, you're going to send me the kind of summary couple of pages about the Caring Schools scope and sequence, so I can do a crosswalk for you, right?
Yes. Yep. I'll be sure and get on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, do. If it would be helpful to you. I mean, I don't want to put another chore on your to-do list, but if that's helpful to you, I'll keep an eye on my inbox.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Well, I guess I would just close by saying that, again, I want you to remember that I've extended an open invitation. And if at any point you say to me, Clark, it would be helpful to have a Zoom meeting with staff or a refresher or whatever, I've got these data, I'm not sure what to do with them or how to make sense of them, don't be shy. I think, all this stuff and how to use data, how to interpret it, it's relatively new stuff, and we're happy to go over it in whatever ways would be useful to you. So please ask for our help, and we're more than happy to provide it in any way we can.
Excellent. Thank you all so much.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joanna, any other things you think we ought to cover?
No, I think that's it. So for when you get your students' logins and passwords, you'll get that at the same time you get your student password for their survey. And if your students you only have K through 3, you won't get any logins for your SEL surveys for your students, so you'll just get logins for Cell Lab. And I'll try to make it more clear in our emails, because there are a lot of different moving pieces going on, and we'll try to be more intentional about that.
Great.
All right. Well, it was nice to meet everybody, and hopefully we'll be in touch before too long.
Thank you.
So.
All right. Take care.